There is a remarkable story in Judges chapter 9 that references an obscure tree. But when we understand that tree, we gain a powerful illustration on what faithfulness looks like in our lives today. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a tree you've probably never heard of before. In Hebrew, it is known as the Atad tree, but it often gets translated into our English as bramble or thorn bush. And we're going to have to explore if there isn't a better way of understanding what the Atad actually is. And the location for our story today is Judges chapter 9. And so on a map, let me locate you where we are at in the land of Israel. And as you can see, we're in the upper kind of 1/3 area. And as we zoom in here, you can see that we have Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal, and then the city of Shechem is right beneath these two mountains. And so this is in the book of Judges. Many of you know about what we call the Judges cycle that goes all throughout the book of Judges. And what's more is that we have 12 judges in the book of Judges, but we have an interruption. And we're going to be looking at that interruption in this episode because it's with a guy by the name of Abimelech, and it's in Judges chapter 9. He's not a judge. He's not listed among the 12 judges in the book of Judges. But the reason why his story is taking place in chapter 9 is because his story is connected to Gideon. So notice the last part of Judges 8. We read that now Gideon had 70 sons. That's a lot of sons. That's a lot of procreation right there. Who were his direct descendants, for he had many wives, no doubt. And his concubine, so now we're introduced to a concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Now, Abimelech means my dad is king, or my father is king, Abimelech. And so we have Abimelech here, who is a son of Gideon through Gideon's concubine. Now, Gideon's going to die, and as we dip into chapter 9, verse 1, we read this. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, which is Gideon, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, hey, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. And their response is, yeah, good point. Let's not do the 70 sons, and Abimelech, let's choose you. And so in doing so, they make Abimelech their ruler, and then Abimelech has all 70 of his brothers murdered, except for one who snuck away before it was known that he had gotten out of Dodge. And his name is Jotham. And a few verses later, we read that Jotham finds out what happens, that Abimelech has been made ruler, that all of his brothers are dead. Now, when they told Jotham, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim and raised his voice and called out. And he said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. So he's going to shout something from Mount Gerizim. So going back to our image, you can see that he is standing above the people of Shechem in order to yell out this, what's going to be a fable to them. And then once he's done, he's going to get out of there. And so he's going to tell them a fable. Now, oftentimes people will say, hey, it's Jotham's parable. The problem is that a fable by definition deals with inanimate objects or trees that are acting like people. Parables do not. So it's parable-like, but by category, because Jotham is going to tell a story about a bunch of trees talking and interacting with one another. It's going to be a fable, and it's actually the first fable we have in Scripture. And this is how the fable goes. The trees, and Jotham is saying, this is you all you leaders of Shechem, once went out to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance, talking about the rich oil from the olive, by which God and humans are honored, and go hold sway over the trees? He says, all right, y'all went to an olive tree, and the olive tree said no. Then it says, next the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees? He said, y'all went to a fig tree, and the fig tree said no. So then Jotham says, then the trees said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and humans and go hold sway over the trees? And it's like Jotham says, hey, y'all went to a grapevine, and even the grapevine said, not doing it. And so we just pause for a moment. I love where we are at in this Flora Faith series, because as we line up the olive tree, the fig tree, and the grapevine, we've talked about all three of these. In your mind, you're probably already thinking, yeah, these are like the big three in the land of Israel. And Jotham said, any one of these would have been fantastic. But they said no, and instead, Jotham says, here's what you did. And here's how the fable concludes. Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if you are really anointing me as king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come out of the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Now, where we have the word bramble here is the word atad in Hebrew. And again, we translate it as either bramble or thorn bush, but it just doesn't seem to fit the context of the story, because when people are interpreting the atad into a tree, it's like, well, which one are we actually dealing with? It's not like everybody universally knew, well, that's the atad tree. Now they, in a sense, do, because of the work we're going to talk about here in a few moments. But as it was originally translated into the English, you get bramble or thorn bush. And if you look at the bramble that is being referred to here, its technical class, if you will, is the Lycium europaeum. And it's a thorn bush, it is a bramble, and it's not all that impressive. And people say, well, yeah, that's kind of what Jotham is doing. He's comparing Abimelech to this, kind of pathetic little bramble, thorn bush. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because Jotham already knows the power that Abimelech wields. I mean, Jotham is screaming this from the top of Mount Gerizim, so when he's done with the fable, he can go off the backside and get away from the people, because obviously one of the brothers is not dead. And so he understands the power of Abimelech. And so it doesn't seem to be that he's comparing him to this little weak little bramble or thorn bush. It seems to be that he's comparing him to something else. And you see this even in the words in the fable, which is that on the lips of the atad tree, Jotham says, the atad says, come and take refuge in my shade. The bramble casts hardly any shade, and that's only if the sun is at a very low level. It's not very impressive whatsoever. And this is why so many scholars started to wrestle with the story of Jotham's fable as to what is the atad tree. And seminal among the work that has been done was done by a guy by the name of Nogah Hareuveni. And Nogah Hareuveni came to the conclusion that based on the options available and indigenous to the land of Israel, the atad tree should be understood in connection to what is known as the ziziphus spina Christi tree. And this tree is very different than the bramble. Here is an image of an atad tree, a ziziphus spina Christi tree, at a place called Neot Kidumim. This was a place that has been cultivated in Israel to basically be a nature reserve for the flora connected to the Bible. And this is where Nogah Hareuveni did his work and has produced several books around the flora of the biblical story. And his identification of the atad as the ziziphus spina Christi tree has been, for the most part, universally accepted by scholarship today. And so what you see here is even that line, come and take refuge in my shade, you go, of course, because the Atad casts this massive shade. In fact, the tree itself reaches over 30 feet tall. It is the largest fruit tree in the land of Israel, which also connects into Jotham's fable, because if he's talking about the olive tree with its olives, the fig tree with its figs, and the grapevine with its grapes, he's talking about fruit-producing trees and vines, and a bramble doesn't produce anything but thorns. But you come to the ziziphus spina Christi tree, the Atad tree, and you see that it has this fruit. And it's like small sour apples. And, they don't taste particularly great, but they don't taste particularly horrible. It sits somewhere in the middle. It has these beautiful flowers in the tree as well. But anyone will tell you that the ziziphus spina Christi tree is also covered in thorns. Long, pointy thorns, as you see in this image. Nasty, hooked little thorns that you see in this image, and that is all part of the Atad tree. But what makes the Atad tree isn't its fruit, isn't its thorns, it's actually its roots system. It's what's going on under the surface. And what we read from Nogah Hareuveni in his work on the tree and shrub and our biblical heritage is he says this about the Atad. Though the Atad is beneficial in many ways to shepherds and wheat harvesters, the tree is known to be harmful to other fruit trees. It is a strong tree whose roots spread in a wide circle and compete with the roots of other trees with a vigor the other fruit trees cannot rival. A farmer who wants his orchard to succeed must first uproot every Atad in the vicinity, both small saplings as well as full-grown trees. That is insightful, because what we see about the Atad tree is it's not so much, its presence above, it's what it's doing underneath. And what it's doing is that its roots go out and it steals all of the nourishment from the other fruit trees' root systems around it in order to give itself what it needs. On the surface, it looks really impressive. It produces fruit. It's big, it's tall, it casts a wide shade. But Jotham says, be very careful, because looks can be deceiving. And when he pulls in the Atad, everyone who understands how an Atad works recognizes that at its heart, an Atad is a tree that serves itself at the expense of others. And that's what Jotham is warning them with. And not only warning them in the fable, warning them from where he is shouting the fable from. He is on Mount Gerizim, and here's what makes Mount Gerizim such a significant aspect of this story and not just some random detail about the geographical location, is that many of you will know that after Israel is given the covenant again, that they have the commandments once more from Moses. Moses is going to die, the people come into the land, and essentially when they come into the land, they are supposed to shout the blessings from Mount Gerizim and the curses from Mount Ebal. And so Jotham goes up on Mount Gerizim, the mountain of blessing, and you go, it seems like he's basically telling the people that Abimelech is going to be a curse. Why doesn't he go up to Mount Ebal? Exactly, I think that there is a paradox at play that's very poignant, which is this. He goes up onto Mount Gerizim to say to the people of Shechem, you think Abimelech is a blessing to you. You're falling prey to his stature, his looks, his power. But recognize he is an Atad tree. He is going to be a curse to you. And he's going to leach out all of the nutrients you have in order to try to make himself great. And you are going to be collateral damage in the process. And that's exactly what I believe Jotham is doing here. And the brilliance of this fable is that when he brings the Atad into play, he's basically saying it serves itself at the expense of others. Now, all throughout the series, we have been connecting Flora to our faith. And we've been talking about how do we live a fruitful life? How do we live a life of faithfulness in connection to what we learn about Flora in the biblical text? And for me, the challenge becomes, where in my life am I acting like an Atad tree? Like, is there any place in my own way of doing things where I'm actually serving myself at the expense of others? And I would just pose that to you as well. Are there any Atads in your life? Is there any way in which you are serving yourself, but you're actually doing that at the expense of others? Maybe within your own family, there are certain things that you do where you go, man, this is something that just really gives me life, but maybe it's out of proportion to a place where, you're feeding yourself, but you're actually depleting your family around you in order to have what you think you need to have. This is true in leadership. It's very easy to be very ambitious. It's very easy to want to achieve things. And at times, you are doing that at the expense of other people. That you're not leading others to get you all where you need to go. You're doing it because you're serving what you want to have to get you to where you need to go. But in order for you to grow big and strong, at least in appearance to other people, it's actually costing the nutrients of those around you. Sometimes we know that even in our own personal lives, that we can be functioning as an Atad and we don't want to be an Atad. That maybe we're struggling with some sort of addiction and we aren't coming clean around it. And so we're serving ourselves with something we don't want to be serving ourselves with, but it's actually creating this collateral damage around us. There's lots of ways in which we can serve ourselves at the expense of others. But that's not how the biblical narrative is guiding people of faith to live their lives. I mean, even just looking to the example of Jesus, one of many places we see in Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That everything Jesus did was about, how do I bring life to other people? How do I accomplish my mission, my task, my calling in a way that gives life? It doesn't steal life. And so as we just ponder this fable from Jotham, to the people of Shechem about a guy named Abimelech, we have an opportunity to look on our own lives and to think about the Atads that maybe we have in the orchard of our life. And that if we're going to live faithfully to God in a way that brings life to others in the process, then we must uproot the Atads in our lives. And that's the story in Judges 9 that helps us to better understand the flora and what it looks like in our own faith. So friends, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, may you take these words to heart and may you walk them out well in your life.